Bionicle, Universe 144, Book 1, Tale of the Tova, written and narrated by Toa of Yak. Chapter 1. Barracks sat down on a small rock that stood against the outside wall of his new home in the now developing coastal city of Gamagna. This new civilization was located on the shores between the old Bota Magna forests and the Aqua Magna ocean. Ferrix marveled at the construction of his new hut. It was surprisingly stable and sturdy considering the new change in weather patterns bringing in stronger gusts of wind off of the ocean waves. He had managed to salvage a solid door made of protodermis from an onumatoran, and in heavy wooden walls carved from the lush trees by some lematoran. With all of the new material coming from Matanui's giant robot body, as well as the planet reforming, life had improved for the Agori, and Barracks no longer had to scavenge for parts or materials. He looked along the coastal line to see other huts, buildings, bridges being built into the small cove that God Magna was being built on. A city on the water, it had been nicknamed by the Gamatoran named Kamaku. Part of the city was being built on the shoreline, expanding up into the grassy fields that eventually would lead to New Otero. The other part was being built on massive bridges constructed out of wood and protodermis slabs. It almost looked like a massive raft. However, sea life and vegetation were integrated into the streets, homes, and buildings to better collaborate with the reformed world. Yes, life was indeed very good right now. Barracks mentally checked off all of the great things that had happened to him lately. The Skrull were scattered to the winds with not a hint at their return, and their leader Tuma exiled somewhere out into the world. The Bone Hunters had disappeared back into what now remained of the much smaller desert near what will soon become Po Magna. Barracks had heard of some Pomatoran who had seen a herd of them attempting to rob an Agori worksite, but had been thoroughly beaten back by a Toa of stone named Podark and the Glatorian Gresh. Barracks had also mended his relationship with Kina, who had begun to teach him more about self-defense to help Barracks survive the current change on the planet. With the arrival of the Toa and Matoran came new beasts called Rahi that were quite difficult to navigate when irritated. Barracks had been unfortunate to meet a Tarakava on a boating trip up the coast, and only with the help of the Toa Nuva of Water was he able to make it back to shore. Kina had ensured that Barracks would need to stay close until he was ready to manage the new state of the world, though Barracks didn't mind. With the new City of Water coming together, due in large part to the added help of the Toa and Matoran, who had an amazing knack for building and working, Barracks could afford to lay back and snag a few winks. In the back of his mind, Barracks knew he would need to carve out a path down to the main city gates before dark. But for now, a nap was just what the great beings had ordered. Barracks had chosen to set up shop on the outskirts of the city, making it the perfect place to tinker with various materials taken from the Great Spirit robot. Kina had suggested Barracks start a trade business, to be more legitimate in his collecting. Tarduk had offered to go exploring with him to find artifacts for Barracks to trade to the Matoran. Ranu had encouraged him to join the new Council of Water tribe Agori and Gamatoran. Barracks didn't quite know what his destiny might be yet. However, he knew he would get to it eventually. It had been too long waiting for this calm, beautiful day to come, and he was going to take advantage of it. But before he could close his eyes, he spotted his new proto-steel knife laying on the ground, and sat back up. He had gotten this knife in a trade with a Pomator named Hafu, who had recently returned from a journey into the Great Spirit robot, accompanied by Toa guards. Barracks inquired about plans to journey inside and go scavenging, but a Toa of Water named Gali Nuva had squashed his plans, much to the delight of Kina. Gali had informed Kina that the inside of the robot would be very hazardous without it being active. It should only be explored in teams prepared to survive in harsh conditions. Due to their different nature, Toa and Matoran would have a much easier time inside than Glotorian or Agori. Naturally, Kina had kept a close eye on Barracks ever since, and maybe another reason she was giving him defense lessons. Barracks picked up the blade and twirled it in his hand, admiring the details and sturdiness. Kina, someone who had longed for adventure, was siding with the idea of not exploring a whole new universe? But Kina was hard-headed, and checked in on Barracks daily now, so there was no chance of scavenging a few more stronger materials for his collection. So Barracks had decided to put off his plans for now. He tucked the knife into a bag that laid beside him, and laid back down. He was just about to sail off into a beautiful dream of finding an artifact so rare he would have to command the respect of all Glotorian, when something buzzed in his bag. It buzzed rhythmically in a slow, deep vibration that began to shake the ground underneath. For a moment, Barracks was confused. Was it the knife buzzing? Could it have some kind of capabilities to vibrate to better cut through tough material? No. Wait, he recognized this buzzing, though it was something that had never buzzed before in all the years he had held on to it. It reminded him of how someone told him a certain item that was given to him would only buzz when Barracks lunged for his bag and dug around frantically to find a small circular communicator of silver and gold. He had two halves to it, leaving it closed when not in use. He yanked it out of his bag, flipped it open to reveal a small speaker element on the bottom half and a glowing silver light on the top half. He heard a deep voice coming out of the speaker, one he had not heard in years. Barracks gulped and responded. "Yes, Angans, I am here." The voice continued on in a low tone, hushed either due to the sensitive nature of the request or due to Barracks not fully understanding how this communication worked. "The time has come. I have a task for you." Barracks tensed up even more. He looked around him frantically to see if anyone else was around. Since he was the only one smart enough to take some time off, he was alone for now. If only Kina knew what he was up to, or who he was talking to. She would throw him into the new ocean to be fed upon what he had seen to be some kind of large fish with lots of sharp teeth. Maku had nonchalantly told him that these fish were called Takea sharks. Barracks shuddered. He did not look friendly, and Kina's idea to go shark surfing was not on top of his priority list right now. Barracks continued to scan the city, looking for Kina until he spotted her. Kina was using her new water powers to help Gali Nuva, Toa Water, create wells for the Agori and Matoran to drink out of down the hill on the outskirts of the city. It was also training for Kina in how to use her powers over water, so Barracks knew she wouldn't be back to check on him for some time. Barracks looked back at the communicator and spoke. "What is it, sir?" He turned away from the direction of the water warriors. "The Mask of Life. I need it for informational purposes." Barracks froze. This was the price he would have to pay to get what he needed? "You mean the mask that Matanui had used to give all the Glotorian elemental powers?" Barracks wished this was a joke. He really hoped he was being pranked right now. He was not. "Yes, that's correct. According to my scanners, it should be in Akar's home for the time being. I believe there are plans to fully build a vault to keep it in once Ta Magna is complete." Barracks nearly dropped his communicator. "Akar's home? No one steals from Akar, especially Matanui's mask. Is this really the task you want me to do, after all these years?" The voice in his communicator paused for a moment. Barracks hoped the great being had just been wanting to test out his new sense of humor, after being gone for so long. "Yes, Barracks. It is of the utmost importance that I have that mask in my lab. I need to learn what happened inside the Great Spirit robot." Barracks rubbed the back of his neck. Angans continued. You should also know this is a secret mission, Barracks. No one else can know. If you get caught, you need to lie about why you were doing it. Barracks understood the need for secrecy. Even back in the old days when the great beings were more involved with the planet, their plans were never really known to the Agori. The coming of the Elemental Lords had been a big shocker to them all. One day, a water tribe Glotorian had been summoned to one of the great being's labs, and when he returned, he was pure water, a force of the aquatic world. He had been named their leader that day, though none of the Agori really understood why. Barracks returned his attention to the communicator. I am not sure who you can trust yet, Barracks. If this plan got out to anyone, it may lead to undesirable consequences. A storm is brewing, and I want to understand the cause before facing it. Barracks frowned. Weren't things supposed to finally be normal? Well, what about Ranu? It may be easier to get permission from an Agori leader to analyze the mask than to sneak into a former Prime Glatorian's home to steal an artifact that once belonged to his most important ally. Angans was silent for a moment. You and Ranu have your roles, Barracks. Ranu will help me acclimate back into the Agori society when the time is right for me to return. The Agori and Glatorian trust him, and soon the Toa and Matoran. However, no one trusts you, Barracks. This makes you perfect for this assignment. Barracks dropped his head. Low blow. Low blow from a being that was mostly responsible for the life he had known and for his hopes of a better future. He spoke softly into the communicator. Gee, thanks. Now, can I trust you on this very important mission? Barracks stared at the communicator with a mix of emotions he had long since buried, like the old world of Spherus Magna. Angans had made him a promise long ago when he had been a different Agori, one that would solidify Barracks' status in this world and make him more memorable. A promise he had been working so hard during these last few years to assure would become reality. One he would give anything for, do anything, and face anything for. He gripped the communicator tightly. Yes, Angans, I will do it. I will find some way to get you what you need. In fact, I still have that sword you gave to me. You know, the one you told me could take away any fighter's strength, leaving them too weak to move? Barracks stood up, determination now flooding his eyes. He quickly looked back over to the spot where Kina and Nuva were still working, noting their progress and how long it might take before they noticed he was gone. He sighed, and straightened up his posture and walked towards his door. Angans spoke on. Thank you, Barracks. Barracks almost fell. Did Angans just thank him? Angans continued. Fulfill your mission and I will keep my promise to transform you into a mighty Glatorian. I say, you maybe could even become one better than your friend Kina. Remember, if this goes wrong, you must take it to the grave. There are beings in this world who may seek to stop what I am trying to find out. Barracks closed his door and made his way towards his bed. What kind of beings? Barracks asked. There was another pause before Angans spoke. Beings who may seek to ensure your destiny never becomes a reality, and thus turning our world into something far darker than what you had faced on Barra Magna. Do this job well, Barracks. The world may just be counting on you. With that, the communicator went dark. Barracks stowed it back into his bag as he reached his bed. He removed the straw mattress, beginning to plan how to collect his prize, which would no doubt be the most daunting challenge of his life so far. Barracks had faced many a challenge on Barra Magna. However, those enemies had just been that, enemies. He was now going to face those he called friends, and prove in their minds how worthless he might be. Barracks knew very little about the Mask of Life, except that it had been able to give things that were alive a new, life. He had seen it ignite the elemental power of the owner into weapons for many of the Glatorian he knew. This had changed a few Glatorian for the better, becoming more stoic and calm when handling their fights, while others... The mask was also the only item that many of the Agori and Glatorian had to remember Matanui by. Taking it would not go unnoticed and unpunished. Even if Ranu surmised what he was up to, he would not be able to help. Ferrix was good at being in places he wasn't supposed to be, so picking him over Ranu technically made sense. He was also more expendable, more so than Ranu, at least. Which makes me the perfect pawn for this mission. Though, is it really worth it? Ferrix thought of his dream to become a Glatorian. He could be respected like Kina and Akar. He had dreams of being able to fight off dangers like Gresh, and travel the world without a care like Gelu. He even envied Malum, who was able to use his strength to find a new place in this world, so effortlessly among the Vorok's tribe. The anxiety that had been floating around in his limbs turned into sheer determination. Ferrix nodded to himself at his own answer. It is. Ferrix opened up a large hatch that had been underneath his mattress, revealing a long black sword gleaming with power. It had been given to him long ago, and he had only seen it used once. So Angon says this sword can absorb the strength from anyone it touches. Man, I sure hope I don't have to use this on Kina or Akar. I might be able to get the best of them once in a fight through some sheer dumb luck, but not a second time if they manage to push through it. Though, one shot is all that I would need. Ferrix equipped a sheath onto his back and put the sword inside. Angons had given it to him only to be used for missions, due to its power and nature. It also had his mark on the hilt of the sword that Ferrix was to file away if he ever suspected being caught. This was his first, and hopefully only, mission, and he would not disappoint a great being. Becoming a Glatorian, man, that would show them all who I really am. Then maybe Kina would respect me more instead of thinking I was some weakling who needs to be checked in on daily. Maybe I could even become a Toa of water. Now, wouldn't that be something? Night was beginning to creep into the bay, and that would be Ferrix's best time to strike. It would take him a few hours to make it to Tamagna, and once there, he would need all the time he could get. Man, I am about to become the most wanted Agori, and I surprisingly feel ready for it. Ferrix closed his bag and walked out the door. Well, I guess I'm going to be alive long enough to apologize to Kina later, or too dead to care. End of Chapter 1.